Hello, everybody. Welcome to the North Center Fields public meeting. We are excited to have everybody on board. Looks like we've got great attendance tonight. We want to thank you for your time. My name is Kurt Albright with the City of Mesa Engineering Department, the Public Relations Group. We prepared a short presentation we'll be going over here in a minute. One of the things I want to remind everybody in this setting where we're all at home and watching this, that there's a chat option. If you are looking at your screen, there's a place for you to enter any questions or comments you have as we go throughout the presentation. Please keep them somewhat short and specifically about this project so we can properly answer those. So your cooperation, that would be appreciative. With that, I'll pass it to Valerie and we'll move on with the presentation.
Thank you, Kurt. Hello, everyone. Good evening. My name is Valerie Ayong. I'm a landscape architect with the City of Mesa's Engineering Department. I also serve as one of the project managers for North Center Sports Field. On our panel this evening, we have a handful of folks from both the city and the consultant side. We have Andrea Moore with the City of Mesa's Parks and Recs Department. We have RJ Zeter with Transportation. We have John Catt with RPA, who's one of our consultants. Michael Park with EPG, another one of our consultants. And last but certainly not least, Vice Mayor Freeman, and also council member for this district. Before we get started with the presentation, Vice Mayor, do you have any comments or words you'd like to address to the group?
Thank you, Valerie. Yes, I would. I want to say thank you for all of us, every one of you, for being here this evening. And we always feel public input is very important, and I'm glad to see so many engaged. Before this meeting, I want to start about these sports fields. I want to put to bed some risks for some rumors that are floating in the community in regards to a freeway off-ramp at Mesa Drive, sidewalks, curb and gutter, sewers, street lights, or any other infrastructure in the area. This is simply not true. There's none, nada, or zero plans for this at this time. For the past 15 years, I've fought off many types of developments for this particular parcel, such as a multifamily complex with 200+ dwelling units, a 100+ single-family home development, and a solid waste transfer facility. This simple facility, and I want to emphasize simple, will only be 5 multi-use fields that are locked. When not in use, they will be unlit. It will have no amplified sound system, no bleachers, no field house. This will be a place where families can come and watch their children play sports. I, along with city staff, have thought through parking, traffic control, equestrian use, and more. Staff has heard your concerns and has made changes that minimize the impact to the area, to the community. But I want to just emphasize again, in 2018, the City of Mesa voters approved a parks bond package that included the construction of these fields. There is a responsibility to the entire city, and therefore the project will move forward. As a longtime Lehigh resident, I hear your concern, and I will continue to monitor any increase in traffic or usage. I will encourage traffic studies at the appropriate time so we can adjust when necessary. So with that, I'd like to turn back the discussion to presentation to the presenters. Thank you, Valerie.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Freeman. Kurt, if you could please go to the next slide. So as Vice Mayor Freeman mentioned, this is from the 2018 General Obligation Bond. We do also have a deficit of field availability within the City of Mesa. So this is a result of a lot of community needs for multi-use fields, especially in West Mesa region for the city. From a schedule standpoint, we are currently in design. We plan to wrap up design spring of 2021, move into construction summer of 2021, and then finish out construction in fall of 2022. As mentioned, we've gone through a series of public meetings since February of this year. We've also had a handful of focus groups with some of the neighborhood Lehigh folks in March as well as in June. And we are here today in November and for the second public meeting to provide you all with an update to our design and status of the project. We've heard a lot of the comments received. We've gathered the input. We've looked at the design today. We've reviewed everything. We've made changes accordingly to help reduce the overall site impact to the surrounding area, addressing a lot of the concerns regarding light and traffic along North Center, and hopefully we can provide you all with a wonderful project moving forward. Next slide, please. So as a reminder, this project is located in the northwest corner of McKellips and Center Street, just south of the Loop 202 Lehigh Road area. This parcel is about 24 acres in total, adjacent to the Lehigh sub area. The current design does look into account 5 multi-use lit fields. There is one supporting structure, about 1,700 square feet, includes restroom, storage, and applicable amenities and uses for the site. There's parking, upgraded infrastructure, and we do have some improvements along Center Street. And a lot of these things we'll get to here shortly in the upcoming slides. As a reminder, our park hours, as with all park hours within the city of Mesa, are sunrise to 10 p.m. However, again, this site is gated. So with that, the use of the fields are restricted by reservation only, and the site will be locked at all times unless it's in use. The lights will be turned off unless it's obviously there's enough daylight or no one's using the fields during the evening or nighttime condition. For reference as well, we typically see field uses and reservations weekdays from 3 till closing and weekends from 8 till closing as well. Next slide, please. So this is our current site plan to date. Moving from the right of your screen to the left, I'll go over some of the high level improvements that we're applying for this project. Starting on the right side, we are doing improvements along the right of way and including a 10-foot wide equestrian pathway from south of our boundary up to Lehigh Road. We'll be including some Center Street roadway improvements. We'll be maintaining the northbound single lane, adding 2 southbound lanes, applicable sidewalk, curb and gutter, landscape, hardscape improvements, and we'll go into that a little bit further detail in the coming slides. There is a portion as we move into the site that will not be gated to allow for circulation when the park is closed and people need to turn back towards McKellips. We'll have 2 entry points, one at the north and one at the south, both with pork chop traffic remediation elements to it and signage. Again, the 5 fields and most of the parking is gated, so there is a gate access in the northeast corner. And then when we start talking about the elements within the gated area, there's the 5 fields, we have the lit, and all of them are lit. We have the restroom building, again with storage and maintenance, and 1 small office building. In lieu of concessions, we have a food truck pad area. So when there are major sports events, there'll be food trucks that can drive up and land on this pad and accommodate the spectators and visitors to the site. Included in the parking, we also have the applicable infrastructure, landscape, retention areas as well. For those of you that do live on the neighborhood to the south, we are providing about a 40-foot buffer from the fields to our property edge, and that edge will include netting to help prevent balls going over into your area, as well as lush landscape and trees and vegetation to help for screening and shade. Next slide, please. Thank you. So this is an enlargement of the pork chop conditions at both of the entry drives. We've heard a lot of concerns about traffic, and what we're doing is designing these 2 entryways with pork chop signage striping. This will help prevent any traffic going northbound and restrict traffic to head southbound upon exiting towards McKellips. So this condition is happening on the north and at the south entry points. And next slide, please. Currently to date, this is what Center Street looks like looking northbound. Our project is to the left of the screen. And then, so if you go to the next slide. What the design team has put together is a section that shows our improvements along Center Street for reference. We have the 10-foot equestrian trail on the east side of Center Street, the single lane northbound lane, a 2-way turn lane just to our project, and 2 southbound lanes, bike lane and sidewalk, and applicable right-of-way improvements, including landscape and retention basin. A reminder, there is existing sidewalk south of our project, so we are tying in to provide pedestrian accessibility. And then south of our project, we also do have 2 southbound lanes. Next slide, please. So this is a view again on Center Street, but looking a little bit in the northwest direction towards our site. You can see it's pretty much barren desert landscape, some mature trees. We have an irrigation ditch and existing roadway. Next slide, please. And this is a beautiful rendering that our consultants put together. This is again looking in the northwest direction, same view. We have our roadway improvements, we have the sidewalk. We're trying to create this rural aesthetic by including a vinyl fencing, some desert adaptive landscape palette, lush new trees to provide screening from the street view, as well as shade for the pedestrians that are walking along Center Street to the site. So you can see that while we're making all these improvements, and in the background you can somewhat see the parking and the lighting, there is a substantial amount of improvements happening along Center Street to help create this beautiful amenity for the area. Next slide, please. Again, we're on Center Street, but now we're looking in the southwest direction and towards the site. And if you can go to the next slide. This is another perspective that the consultants have put together showing the pork chop condition. This is the north entry of our project area. So in the background, you can somewhat see the structure of the building. That's behind the gated area. There's a gate, there's trees, medians, the vinyl fencing, applicable signage, the new roadway. Again, entry is accessible from both ends, but southbound exit only as you leave the park. Next slide, please. So here is Center Street again, but now we're looking in the northeast direction away from our site. And if you go to the next slide. What we show here is the 10-foot equestrian path. So our intent is to clear and grub the right-of-way area, make some slight adjustments if there's signs in the way, and provide this 10-foot decomposed granite pathway to allow equestrian use from the south boundary of our site up to Lehigh Road. And next slide, please. So the next two slides that we'll show here are from Musco. Musco is a lighting manufacturer. They are a spec for the city, so we highly use this in all of our upgraded projects, our new projects and upgrades to existing park projects. This is a timeline showing lighting, and there's been a lot of concern regarding lighting in the area. While we do have trees and walls and other things to help block and screen the lights, new technology to date does cut off light and reduce the amount of light pollution beyond the location of where it's meant to be. So this just shows you overall timeline from the 1970s all the way to date. For reference, there are several projects within the city of Mesa that have this new technology for lighting. For reference, you can go visit Eagles Park, Fiesta Sports Park, and Greenfield Park, and all of those parks have this new technology lighting if you'd like to see it for reference in person. We don't anticipate any issues with lighting when they are on the site. Especially, there's probably some concerns with the neighbors to the south, but again, there's a lot of restriction on there. And the next slide as well will show some of the new features and how it's limited. So Kurt, if you go to the next slide. So this for reference is from the manufacturer. This is Rittenhouse District Park in Gilbert, more recently completed park project within the area. Again, here's another visual that you can see how the technology has really reduced that cutoff and throw of the light and really focusing it just in the field area. We thought this would be critical to show you that you don't see the neighborhoods in the background, you don't see the properties around the field area for the most part. There is a little bit of throw in the back, but again, the area of concern, which would be the property to the south, we've got a 40-foot buffer and trees and landscape to help create that separation. So before we get into our Q&A portion, just want to reiterate that we do have our consultants on the panel as well to help facilitate any questions regarding design of the site. We have folks from various departments here to answer any questions you might have. Again, it's 5 fields, 1 building, the fields are lit, everything is mostly gated. We're doing improvements on Center Street. And there's no concessions, there's no scoreboard, there's no bleachers at all. So with that, Kurt, next slide, please.
Okay. Thank you very much, Valerie. So far we've learned a lot about this new site, all the things that are happening there. We're starting to get a lot of comments that are rolling in. So bear with us. Part of the explanation may take a few minutes. So if you're entering questions now, and some of you have added some in during the presentation. So we're just gonna start from the top and start working our way down. So please just remember right there at the bottom of your screen, there's a little chat box. You click on that and you can type up any questions. We do keep it to the point where we're not going to be calling out names of who this or that, but we will read the questions to address them here with the panel, like Valerie said. So please, as you're doing that, as you're putting in your comments and questions, please keep it specific to this project. and be real specific about any concerns or comments that you have so that we can address that specifically. At times you might get a few questions that come in from several different people that are the same topic. And so I'll put those together. That way we're not asking the same question over and over. And also at the same time, some people are maybe joining a little bit later, and so there may be some repeat questions, but we'll do our best to address all of those. So with that, we're going to start here at the top. Also, lastly, please, in your comments and questions, don't use any inflammatory language. We really want to keep this just focusing on the issues and go through that way. So the first question that came in was a question about other sites. Were there any other sites looked at for this facility or facilities like this?
So this is Andrea Moore with the Parks Department, and we have a severe deficit of fields in the city of Mesa. We have been working on identifying sites for fields such as this for many years. In West Mesa in particular, it's difficult to find enough space to construct these many fields. So specifically for the 2018 bond program on the west side of Mesa, this was the only site that came forward as being big enough and available for this type of sports complex this go around. But this conversation, like I said, has been going on and analysis has been happening for many years. And this one seemed to be the best candidate for something of this size. Again, it's youth programs in particular that we're short on fields for. So I don't want you to think this is bringing in a great deal of traffic from outside of our city. The concentration that we're going to see here is mainly the sports programs and the leagues that are Mesa based.
Thank you, Andrea. Okay, the next question we have was about timeline. Let's talk a little bit about that. I know that we have kind of the initial part of design and construction, but also opening. Can we have the panel talk a little bit about that?
So we anticipate construction to wrap up around, I think, September of 2022. So we should have a grand opening around that time. Again, we're still in design. We'll be wrapping up design this spring. We'll start construction hopefully early summer of 2021. We'll have about a year construction time period, maybe a couple months beyond that into the fall.
And one of the things we'll do is, as this process goes on, we'll put signage out on the front there towards center for people driving by. If they have questions, they'll have our contact information and some of the dates on there too as well. So we'll have that out there. Next question that came in is more specific about how the reservation process is. You know, how do they go about doing that, and can it be reserved for other functions other than sports?
Again, this is Andrea from Parks, and we have a staff dedicated to field reservations. And so there's a set, they have all of our league schedules, outside leagues, internal city leagues, and you just make a reservation through that staff group. As far as other types of events, it would be focused on sports use. So if there were other types of special events or programs, we would look to have those at sites that are a little bit bigger and more suited to supporting other types of events. Like Riverview has lots of special events that are based out of that location. Red Mountain Park has them as well. But those locations are better suited to supporting other types of events. This one, the focus is sports use.
That's a good point, because it's not really like ramadas there, but people get creative. So that's good that you have a whole staff that can address their questions, and if they can reach out to them and work out those questions. Okay, one of the questions that came in is how to protect the residents on the west side of center next to the freeway. So I'm wondering if that's referring to the residents that are directly south, but also on the west side, or some of the businesses that are north of there. But then maybe we can talk about both of those aspects. So west side of center next to the freeway.
If we're talking about, this is RJ Zeter from the Transportation Department. If we're talking about traffic, this type of use really will generate less traffic overall than other uses that could have happened here. For example, if a multi-family development went in, we really, with the design that Valerie talked about, we're strongly encouraging people to use center to enter from McKellips into the site and come back out onto center and travel south. With the addition of the sidewalk on the west side of the property, as well as 2 lanes, southbound out of the site down to McKellips, we are very comfortable that there will be no, traffic issues that affect other property owners.
Thank you, RJ. And I think Valerie, you also alluded to some of the trees and the screening on the south side and how the light cut off. So I think that addresses both sides, the transportation aspect and the residents that live there. So if anyone said,
to add to that, there will be netting along the south side too, and there'll be netting along the north side to prevent any balls coming over the fence into property or into the freeway. If there's a personnel security concern, there will be a Parks and Rec staff when the park is open during reservation time. There will be some supervision by at least 1 personnel. I believe there's also signs with park information, city numbers to call if there's a security concern on site for any reason.
good. Okay, question came about some of the vinyl fencing. Well, we know we have that on the west side of center that kind of separates that landscape area from the road along where the pedestrians are. But for safety reasons, what about a fence barrier of some type, maybe the vinyl fencing or something else, to keep horses from accidentally going onto the street? We know this area has quite a bit of equestrian use. I know we had a slide that talked about the path there. Is there any discussion or what can we address for possibly having that type of an issue?
So is there a request for fencing on the equestrian path side?
I believe so. If there's any kind of safety measures we could take and or a vinyl fence of some type on the east side of center. I'm going to go back to that slide while we're referencing it. Okay. That's loading. There we go. So this is the slide that this person is referencing. So is there any type of thing we could do or any options for having some type of a fencing or something to help protect that?
Valerie, do you want me to take this?
Sure.
So as part of roadway design, and RJ, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but part of roadway design is we have a spot called a clear zone, and due to the speeds of traffic, putting a fence along the actual road is kind of might protect horses and the rider, but in general it probably is more of a safety concern as opposed to cars hitting the fence, and then it becomes a maintenance issue. So what we've done is you can kind of see the different colors of the path where we're going to do a buffer between the road and the path to allow some sort of safety buffer. The speed limit in this area is supposed to be low. People shouldn't be speeding. There's a stop sign, so especially in the area where the trail is going to go, low speeds are assumed. So that kind of addresses that question.
I think we also just have to be mindful too of who may own the property to the east of the pathway. A fence will limit access, so there might be some coordination efforts required as well if that were the case to move forward with a fence. Also, we'd have to evaluate the right of way. How much room do we have? We want to provide an adequate amount of equestrian space for, as you see here, 10 feet. If we have to add a fence, we are pushing improvements out. And that may restrict space and access.
So we had a couple that are similar to that. So that's something we'll continue to look at for these comments that have come in. So yeah, a few of them really wanted to insist on looking at safety options for that. They like the option of having that available, but are concerned that having traffic by there. I know right now there's obviously nothing there currently, and we're not changing anything in the width of that, but improving the surface itself for horses.
Yes, we can definitely take a look at it.
So another question came in about reservations. Let's go a little bit deeper into that. Is it only, do you have to have a reservation to use it, or can the neighborhood also utilize it? You know, other than reservations, will it be a time when they can use some of the area there?
So our designated sports fields like this are only available for reservations. We don't leave it open for drop-in use because we keep the field conditions at a higher level of quality to be able to facilitate league and practices and games. There are other locations in our park system that are available for drop-in use, but not here.
Thank you, Andrea. We've had a few comments come in, additional questions. We've had a few people mention they really liked this new layout. They're excited for having some of their kids using it for their sporting events. There is a question here about the entry. Having it on center versus country club. Maybe we can address that, what the reasoning is behind that. And I'll go to that layout picture while we're addressing that so you can kind of see what we have.
Hi, this is RJ again from Transportation. You know, for the folks that live in the area, you know this area better than I do. But the route from Country Club to the site would take us through an ADOT detention basin, and then through, it looks like, more ADOT property to connect to the site. I did have a conversation with ADOT staff last week, following up on a previous conversation. We have asked them to take a look at whether or not they would allow the city to consider an access from Country Club onto the property. Even if we were able to do that, just because of how close that entry point would be to the eastbound ramp to the 202, the best case scenario would be a right in and right out. So we would still need the access off of Center Street. What we're looking at right now, ADOT's looking at whether or not they would even allow us to construct an access at that point. But our staff are looking at what we would need to do to construct through that basin. Because that accommodates stormwater runoff, we would have to deal with that since there's a drop off from Country Club into the basin. We are exploring that, but I don't have an answer at this point.
Thank you, RJ. We've had some comments coming about the soccer deficit that Andrew, you mentioned before. Some of the comments in here talk about that need and how they've tried to get some of their kids on certain leagues and they fill up really quickly. So some of the comments, I'm just grouping a few together here, talk about that. And it's how they have a constant struggle with that, and they're excited about having this option for them. Another question came in about locking up the park. Let's talk about that. I know we talked about some of the fencing but let's talk about what goes around the entire field and how the parking areas are accessed when they're locked up. And I'll go back to that slide where we're talking about it.
John, would you like to take this one?
Yeah, I could take it. Kurt goes back to maybe the site plan. It might be easier to explain it on that one.
Okay. Here we go.
So it's a little hard to. Is there a way to do like a pointer on this?
I've got a cursor on there, but I'm not sure if you can see it or not. But I'm circling the area that has the gate, which is right inside on the north end.
That's all right. So there's an existing fence already on the west side. a 6-foot chain link vinyl fence. In the areas where it's broken and damaged, we'll repair it. There's already a 6-foot block wall along the south side, and then just to the east of the southern field, we'll run it straight north and south, and that's where the gate's going to be. So that parking lot that kind of runs in the north-south direction will always be open to the public. It won't be locked off. This allows people to turn into the parking lot and then and go out if they have to, so that they don't have to go all the way through Lehigh, do U-turns and whatnot. But the entire park's going to be fenced off to protect the property's owners to the northeast, the south, over to the west. And I believe that Mesa PD also patrols this area on a daily basis. I don't know how frequently they do it, but if there are people in the parking lot, I'm pretty sure that they will shoo them away. Valerie, I don't know if there's anything else I need to touch on it, but the gates will be locked during off hours and only opened if there's a reservation or the park is open at the time. And this is similar to what Mesa Parks is doing at, I believe, all their facilities, whether it's soccer, baseball, or whatnot.
Yeah, to go along with that, having that fencing that you're talking about goes all the way around it, that will also kind of deter some of the visitors that have historically been in that area. I know ADOT has done some cleanup efforts out there, but some of the questions coming in are about that. Some of them are referring to urban camping. We'll leave it at that, but having that site fenced off and monitored will help reduce that. A question came in about speed limits. So this would be on some of the surrounding streets, the north-south streets, Stapley, Mesa Drive, Horn. We're asking if there's ability to either adjust or lower the speed limits to help discourage people driving through the community, other avenues.
Again, this is RJ in transportation. We can review the speed limits, but we really aren't anticipating a significant amount of cut-through traffic using streets other than center. So we have to be careful about arbitrarily reducing speed limits. We have, and we're waiting for the results, done both speed and volume counts. So we have a base level of understanding what traffic is in the area prior to construction of the facility. And then our intent is to come back after the facility is operational to update those speed and volume counts so we can actually see what's happening. If something needs to be addressed at that point and we need to consider mitigation measures, we can do that. But what we're trying to do, like I said, is establish sort of the existing condition and then look, once the facility is open and have a clear understanding of what the traffic issues are.
Thank you, RJ. A question came in about some of the trees, the existing trees. Wondering if they will be salvaged or somehow worked into the design.
Michael, would you like to answer that one?
Yes, thank you. We've done a preliminary inventory of the trees on this site. There's approximately 140 trees on the property, of which we have, believe at least 20 to 30 are eligible to be salvaged and reused. It will be driven somewhat by the budget that's available for the project. We will meet with the Parks Department and review those trees specifically to get an agreement with them on the value of salvaging as many trees as we can.
Good, thank you. Let's go back a little bit, talking about the not necessarily the reservations, but how can the community utilize this for some of the needs that they may have, some of their sporting events. I know we talked about reservations and things like that, but is it a real difficult process? Is it very easy, and how can the community use it in that way?
Generally, we hear from sports team to do reservation for practice time, which is usually weeknights. And we typically see games between those local teams during the weekends. So coordinating that through our athletic staff, field reservations, it's how we do reservations on all of our baseball, softball fields and soccer fields, multi-sports fields throughout the city. Did that answer the question, Kurt?
I think so. Yes, because several of them, I'm getting several like that. So I'm looking at them to see what else applies to that. But I noticed in some of the slides that had the vegetation images here. So I'll pull that one back up. This is the area I think they're referring to. That's just on the west side of Center, and some of the mature trees are there. So this is the area that they'll be hopefully incorporated to if possible.
Kurt, this is Mark Freeman. Can I ask a question for Andrea?
Mm-hmm.
So, Andrea, if you're not in league play, but you have a local team here made by community members, can they reserve a field to practice or have in-league competition amongst themselves?
Yes, absolutely. It's not just city leagues or it's any team that is interested in reserving it can do that. We have a set of fees and charges. It's based on whether it's a daytime use or nighttime use, whether we need to do turn the lights on or not, but anybody can do those field reservations.
Okay, yeah, I'm just following up because I know my grandchildren play on a local team that's not particularly a league play, but yet it's organized by local leaders and they have a fun time and they play at parks currently. So I'm just asking the question that they would then be eligible to practice or play at this facility, correct?
Absolutely, absolutely, yep.
All right, thank you.
Thanks for that clarification, Andrea. That takes care of several other comments that came in. I think that's the idea is it's a community also that wants to use this, not just the leagues. And so that's a good option for them to do that. There's some general questions about some of the other sites around the city, specifically about Dobson, how those were taken down. Wanting to know why was it moved, and is that contributing to the deficit that we have?
Dobson.
I think they're referring to over at
The one
Riverview.
over there by Bass Pro.
Oh, okay. So those fields, we had 4 full-size soccer fields, multi-use fields there, and then we had the lights up from the old softball fields. And so those were used during non-spring training times. Those fields were also the parking lots to support Sloan Park. And so we anticipate we'll have more hours available for use here in this location because we don't have to shut the fields down for spring training parking.
There's some other, I'm going to read off a few of the comments that have come in so that everybody here can hear them. There's a few that they're impressed with the care and the considerations we get to Lehigh area and the efforts that have been done by Vice Mayor Freeman and those on the panel, and listening to the concerns about traffic. And there's a few comments in here about that specifically. So I'm going to lump a few of those in there because they're coming in quite fast. So there's also been some concern about, the fees with that. They feel there's some comments that feel that if this is a public facility, why are there fees associated? And does that not make it really a public facility at that point? So maybe why are there fees and generally, what to expect with that?
The fees support the lights and maintaining the field. So Arizona is a climate that requires that we water the grass year round in order to maintain playability and greenness instead of dirt. So there's definitely a cost. This is not fully recovering 100% of the cost of operating the sports fields in this park, but it does help offset particularly the electric and the water bills to support it.
Okay, let's get into a little bit more about the patrol and where it's PD for speed, or whether it's park rangers for checking out the site from time to time. Let's talk a little bit about that and what that will do. A few of the questions that come in comments are speed and how they say we don't see a lot of PD presence. They're not really watching speed. And how does that translate in this? So how can we address those concerns?
Oh, it's RJ again from Transportation. I can't speak for the police department. Hopefully you've all noticed, the folks in particular in the Lehigh area, we have installed driver speed feedback signs on Lehigh Road west of Mesa Drive. We should be activating another set both eastbound and westbound on Lehigh Road east of Mesa Drive tomorrow. And we are going to look to install another set of driver speed feedback signs north of Lehigh Road on Mesa Drive. And what this is it's a sign, that says what the posted speed limit is, and then it's radar, that tells the drivers what they're actually driving. So, we do want to let people know, both what the speed limit is and how they're actually driving down the roadway.
Speaking of the roadway, what about, there's been several questions come in about the older section of road. There's been several different terms for it, but I think they're referring to the road that as you go north from the 202, it kind of goes over onto, I believe, the county area there, that would go west out to Country Club. Is that something that can be used as a connection or to be improved?
If we're talking about what's referred to as Old Lehigh Road, which is adjacent to the city's North Center Yard, that is actually private property as you go west from there. I drove it last week. It's not the most pleasant experience driving wise. It is accessible. I don't anticipate a lot of people actually using that.
Is that the condition of the road? And that's not a Mesa maintained road, right, RJ?
It is not. It is private property once you get beyond our household hazardous waste facility.
So there has been a few other questions going back to Dobson or the Union area there about why those were sold and if there was a need. So I think there's some question of, we've talked about there's a need now, but some of the fields have been relocated or moved or sold. So maybe we can address a few of these comments regarding that.
So Sloan Park development overall was intended to also help drive economic development in the area. And I think it's being very successful in that effort. So the Union development was definitely part of just that overall building up of the economy in that area around the stadium.
Kurt, let me speak on that too. When I took city council, we were told that the Riverview property was exactly for economic development and was a holding place for future sellout for buildings, and that happened. So during the time, the property has been sold several years ago and currently is in progress of being built on. So with that, those soccer fields went away, and the lights that were there were reused in other fields within the city, saving some money there. But again, that area of Riverview was slated for economic development. So, and that happened. The city has sold that land and is currently being developed. Thanks.
There's been some comments about having the food trucks there, like how it's not, a concession stand that's built and stays there and only open, but having a food truck that can kind of facilitate different options. Maybe some of the people in the area that may have that as a business could come in and facilitate that. And it keeps the cost down on the city side, right? These are all private businesses that come in and support that kind of thing. So was that the intent? I guess some of the questions were, was that the intent, is to have those there a little more specific to, and how would they arrange to have the food trucks there?
Generally, that happens based on how many fields are in use and whether there's multiple games going on, typically just on the weekends. Practice night, weeknights, it's probably not enough business to support a food truck, but that'll be driven once we see how the reservations go into play there. If there's an organized group there and they are interested in bringing in a food truck to help support what they have going on the field, those are the types of things that'll determine it. But I suspect most of the time it's going to be when there's a tournament involving multiple fields, multiple teams that, like I said, typically just on a weekend would be enough business to support food trucks in that location.
Okay, good. So some more questions have come in a little bit about some of the pork chop design. There's been some comments how they like how that idea puts everybody south. Just to reiterate, there will be 2 lanes southbound. So there have been some questions regarding traffic that's existing traffic on the road that uses it now, which is a single lane until you get south of this. But how will the additional lanes to the south help with traffic, the pork chops, and also if a cul-de-sac on Lehigh Road has been or would be considered? So I'm lumping the traffic questions generally into this.
You know, as Valerie stated in the beginning of the presentation, we really are working to strongly encourage traffic to come north from McKellips on Center, you know, and then obviously come back out of the facility south on Center, you know, back to McKellips and disperse, you know, whichever direction, you know, the folks are coming from. I think it's premature to talk about cul-de-sacing Lehigh Road. As I mentioned earlier, we are waiting results on both speed and volume counts, you know, in the area. So we have a baseline in understanding how traffic is working in the area. Should there be a bigger impact in the Lehigh neighborhood than we are expecting, we can always look at other mitigation measures. But I think it's a little too early at this point to talk about closing off a public street. I use it as an example in the household hazardous waste facility, you know, that operates, you know, north, you know, of the freeway currently. We're not aware that there's a significant amount of cut-through traffic in or out of the Lehigh neighborhood, aside from the people who live there who might be going to the facility. But what we've observed is the traffic is, you know, working the way we've intended it to, you know, using Center in and out. And you know, this is just an anecdotal observation. I don't think it makes sense for people to be cutting through the Lehigh neighborhood to or from, you know, this site. I can't say that no one will drive through Lehigh because these are public streets. But I think we're better to establish information both pre and post construction before we make those kind of decisions.
Thank you, RJ. So there's been a few questions about the grass. It came up a minute ago. Andrew, you alluded to how well it's kept up. There's some questions about if it's going to be overseeded during seasonal times and what that would look like. And is there a maintenance period throughout the year?
So we do not intend to overseed these fields. They will stay green in the summer and go into dormancy in the winter, but maintain them to try to keep turf coverage in good condition throughout the year. And we typically will still do field maintenance time, if you're familiar with other sports complexes and fields, in the middle of summer. So usually around the August timeframe when we see less play because it's too hot, we stop the reservations and let the grass grow in, get thicker, be healthier for the rest of the year. And I also wanted to point out, just in terms of those reservation questions again, our athletic staff pointed out to me, and I should have mentioned this, that if you go to our website, mesaparks.com, there's information about how to do those field reservations and what our policies are related to that available there.
Yeah, we've had a few more comments come in about having more fields. We've talked about that quite a bit, but they continue to come in. And just to remind everybody, we do have some people that will have come on a little later in the meeting. And so some of these questions we're going over may be somewhat repetitive, but in general, we've talked about the reservation. We've talked about some of the traffic mitigations and securing the site and protecting it from some of the encampments that sometimes frequent that area. So I'm going to go ahead to some more of these others about about traffic. There was a question about having possibly speed humps and whether that's been considered, or is that a possibility?
I would have to take a look at our speed cushion or speed hump policy. I'm not sure if Center Street, which really would be a collector street, would qualify for speed humps. There are businesses that operate, north of this site. So I'm not certain that speed humps would be appropriate at this location. We can review that, but my gut reaction is that this would not be a good place for that type of device.
Just to go off of that, Kurt, can you go to the site plan again, please? So we are taking advantage of some of these speed humps and traffic calming measures within the park itself. The long run that goes east to west, and then you got the cul-de-sac that turns around. There's a couple areas where we put in those traffic calming speed humps so that, because we know people are going to be walking from the south side of the park to the north side of the park. It's hard to see on this site plan, but from where the food trucks are going to be and the restrooms are, that's kind of like a raised area to give people to slow down, knowing that kids are going to be going from the food truck to a restroom, or families are going to be crossing the street just to get to one side of the park to the other side. So might not be doing it on Center Street at this time, but we're definitely doing it within the park.
So referring back to this site as opposed relocating from other sites, some of the questions came in about would this site experience the same thing and be relocated at some point? Would it be selling it for offices at some point, down the road, or is this in place for generations to use?
From our perspective, it's in place for generations to use. So we are adding a new park site, intending it to be part of the park system. Definitely a different situation than constructing Sloan Park in partnership with the Cubs and the economic development that was driven around there. This is adding to the park system intended to stay as a park.
So regarding this presentation, these slides, they will be attached. We've had a few questions come in how they can get a hold of those. I will attach those here momentarily. If you are on your computer, on your phone, there'll be an area there for attachments, which we'll go over in a few minutes here, but that's where we'll have these slides. We'll attach them there. There's also other ways that we'll go over in a minute. You can reach out to us if you have a hard time downloading those, and we can send those to you directly. So yes, the presentation and other items will be attached to this here momentarily. So that there was a few questions that came in on that. A question came in about the facility use. Other than soccer, what else can these fields be used for? Sports related.
It's multi-sports. So I know we've played kickball on soccer fields. We play lots of different age groups on soccer fields. So the little kids play the short sides of the fields. We can put multiple fields for young kids on each soccer field. It's pretty much whatever type of sport can fit on a field that's 240 by 360 feet is what we would play here. Or any smaller configuration of that.
Of course, you have those dimensions memorized, don't you, Andrew?
Well, and that's why we size it that way, so that we can play lots of different options, lots of different sports on here.
What about putting any kind of walking paths, biking paths inside the park or around the perimeter, possibly? I know we've discussed how to be gated off, but will there be anything like that, or has that been considered?
So we have space around each field. It's definitely an option when you're in there to be able to walk around the fields, but it's not something that would be open if we don't have field reservations. And we wouldn't want to have a sidewalk, for example, all the way around all the fields, because people are overrunning the field, going past the field area. That wouldn't be such a good condition if you're playing a game on the field and hit a piece of concrete like that. But definitely when the fields are open for use, you can walk around the fields if you want to.
Good. Let's get into a little bit of the parking. We've had a few questions on that. It looks like from the last iteration, it has shrunk from 6 to 5 fields. Is there sufficient parking for the number of fields?
I can take that one. So yeah, the park did shrink in size, but necessarily the parking ratio, it still stayed the same. We're still around that 65 stalls per field, which is the same ratio that we had when we had the 6th field. So even though parking's less, there's one less field, but the ratio stays the same.
And the idea behind that is to have enough parking available for when teams are coming and going in that transition time when you have more cars on site, so that we don't end up with people trying to park out beyond the park area.
Hey, Kurt, and I might add that there's some additional unused portion of this that if parking is an issue that we could expand if possible. I believe at the cul-de-sac there to the north. Is that right?
I think there's some possibility with the ADOT parcels to the west.
Okay. Well, we could discuss that later, but there's room for expansion if we need to.
Yeah, it looks like there is some of the area that's on this slide here to look at that if that becomes a need or something. But yeah. So we continue to get a few more questions about the reservations, how much it costs. I mean, I don't know if we have that answer, but maybe we can first talk a little bit about that, how expensive it is, or generally what it costs.
I don't know that off the top of my head, but if you go to that website, mesaparks.com, again, we have that information based on different sizes of fields, and then again, whether it's daytime use or nighttime use. Sorry, I don't know what that is off the top of my head.
Mm-hmm. There's been some questions about looking at considering using a turf. I think they're referring to like synthetic turf and some of these questions, as opposed to having a grass field.
We have studied that a lot because it is a solution to offer play year round, where you wouldn't have the grass go dormant in the winter and have downtime in the summer to regrow the grass. However, in Arizona, we consider the heat to be too much of a problem on artificial turf. So a lot of those studies are showing that you have to break from play several times an hour in order to stay safe because of how hot those get, especially in our climate. It's not something we would recommend.
I don't think on these slides, do we note how many parking stalls we've had? Since that last question, we had a few more come in. Is there a count on that or general? Do we know that?
Yeah, so Kurt, there's 317 stalls, 310 of them are regular, and then 7 of them are handicap. If you want a better number, the parking outside the gate, there's 145 stalls, 0 are handicap, and then within the gate, it's 172 with the 7 of the handicap. So 317 total right now, which equates to about 63 per stall, or 63 stalls per field.
I've had a few comments come in about liking having soccer fields in a place for kids close to the home. Like that there'll be an area that will be maintained. I think also both of them, one maintained for generations, also just the maintenance of the fields to keep it looking beautiful. So we've had a few of those come in. A few more about speed humps, which we addressed here a minute ago. That's something we do have on site, and we're going to look into a little more. I just want to remind everybody that's putting in comments, every one of these comments is tracked, and we will address those with the design team and the city staff. So some of these are very, very similar, but every one of these will be recorded. Some questions came in asking how many have been submitted. We're looking at a few hundred, so bear with me as we're going through these. We're getting a little bit short on time, so we're going to go through a few more of these. And then we'll talk about how you can submit comments even after this presentation. There's one question that came in about the block wall protecting somebody that lives down south of there. And there's some concerns about that and how that's going to be handled.
I could take that one. So I think they're referring to the resident just south of the eastern parking lot. So the block wall kind of stops short and then it transitions to like a chain link fence. In that portion of it, we're going to extend the existing block wall all the way over to the right of way to make that whole south side a block wall as opposed to the chain link vinyl fence. Hopefully that addresses that question.
Yeah, because there's some of it, because I noticed on the display here, the block wall pointed out this on the south end that you just referred to, but how about to the north? There's some comments about that some of these areas are historic and are concerned, or if horse rail is being planned or used. So will there be a block wall on the north end, if that's been considered, and or horse rail?
So right now we just have on the north end, it's just the vinyl chain link fencing. I don't think we've looked at the option for horse fencing at this time, but maybe it's something that we need to look into.
Okay, let's go through a few more here. We mentioned some of the comments that have come in that talked about the positive side. There are a few comments in here that referring to they are concerned about it. There's some residents close by that have some concerns and are opposed. So we did receive both sides of those in the comments section. So I want to acknowledge that and point that out. Getting down here to the end, we've addressed some questions about overseeding versus synthetic turf. Some questions came in about that though. Will they be using non-treated water or I think what they're referring to is either irrigation water or some other type of reclaimed water for the fields, and or will there be any dog areas or picnic ramadas or a playground?
It's a lot of questions in a row. So it's city water, it's not irrigation water. And we do not have funding right now for picnic ramadas and we wouldn't put a dog run area in here since it's only open when fields are in use.
So just to round out some of the questions here, going through them, a few of them are some ones we've addressed already about the country club access, which we talked about we're looking into. That is currently owned by ADOT, and a few others encouraging and really pointing out they would like to have more police presence patrolling the area because they say speed is a considerable problem. So that's something that's good. We have transportation on here to look at that specifically. Stop signs and things like that, if they can improve different types of stop signs. Those are some of the comments that have come in that we'll share with transportation, look at that. It sounds like PD as well on top of that. So if the parents are on here, let the kids know that they have some PD in the neighborhood looking after them. So as we're closing out here, if anybody else has anything they want to from the panel that wants to mention before we start going into the comment section, we're getting a little late on time, but I wanted to see if there was anything else that people wanted to mention before we start our closeout here. There's a couple others here. So we want to point out that the Parks bonds is what funding is being used to build this. We talked about that a little bit in the beginning. And also, if there be any events that would stop the fields from being used, whether it's weather, turf related issues, things like that. I think Andrew, you could touch a little bit on that, but maybe you could do a little more, especially the maintenance time where they, I think you'd mentioned there's some time of year they do some type of maintenance on the fields.
Yep. So after heavy rains, we do have to shut fields down so they don't get damaged when they're soaking wet and people are running across them. If there's a little bit of rain, typically we're able to keep everything open. And the field closure time for turf grow in every summer is usually somewhere between 4 to 6 weeks. And again, we time that so that it's in the hottest part of the summer. The grass is growing the best at that time, and we see the least amount of use of our fields at that time. So helps us get stronger grass and not push people off the fields.
Okay, last question. What will the restroom capacity be?
I will have to pull that one up. That one I don't know off the top of my head.
I know we talked about the facility being 1,700 square feet. That would include bathrooms and the storage area. So I can't imagine it's not gonna be a large bathroom possibly.
No, and I'm trying to find the exhibit. Bear with me. Sorry, Kurt. If there's another question that you want to move on to while I'm looking this up really quick, we can come back to it. It shouldn't take me long.
Okay. Why don't we, while we're looking that up, I'm gonna, Valerie, if you don't mind, I'll probably go into the comment section and talk about that. Is that okay, Valerie? Or is there anything else you want to cover first?
So it looks like it's 10 stalls total, 5 on
There you
each side.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
And no, I don't have any other comments if you'd like to go ahead and close this out.
Okay. All right, so this last slide here kind of gives us, sorry, it's coming up here in a minute, gives you some other additional ways for you to reach out to us. We have an email, you can send email address here that's listed that you can send in your comments to this. Please include North Center sports fields in that subject line so we can really capture that. We'll comb through those and add any comments you email to us to this list that you've sent in tonight. In addition, there's comment cards in English and in Spanish attached to the presentation here. You can download those. That has our contact information. But please take advantage of that and send that in to us. We're looking to have those comments here by the end of the month, the 27th, 10 days from now. So we have a time where we can gather all those comments and put them together. There will be a survey after we close out this meeting that we'll ask you some additional questions. You feel free to put in your comments there as well. If you feel like you want to answer that tomorrow, it'll come in your email as well, and you can respond to that whenever you have time. But we want to thank everybody for spending their time looking over this. Thank you for the effort you've put in, and as the community, voicing your concerns throughout this process. And hopefully you got your questions answered and see the updates that have happened to help mitigate those concerns. And also hope those of you that are really excited for this as well to keep sending in your comments, and we'll keep addressing those. Again, thank you very much, everybody. We will close this meeting now. I will attach the presentation, so anybody that wants to stay on for a few minutes, they can get that, and we'll go from there. But also thank you, panel, as well, for attending. Okay, all the attachments there, the presentation is there. Some facts about this area, the park, the facility are on there, and of course the comment cards. So again, thank you everybody for attending. We really appreciate your input and taking the time out of your schedules to come visit with us tonight. So thank you, and with that, everybody have a good night.